Hi everybody, welcome back. Can I just start by saying thank you so much for all the lovely messages that I've had from friends and people that know me, and I hope you enjoyed today's story. So today's story is one that I used to love reading to Jack when he was a little boy, and it's called Mrs. Potter's Pig by Phyllis Root. Mrs. Potter's Pig. Mrs. Potter kept a spotless house. The windows glistened, the floors glowed. She even dusted the chickens until they squawked. Everything in Mrs. Potter's house was swept and washed and polished until it was perfectly clean. Everything except baby Irma Jean. Irma Jean loved mess. She drooled and gurgled on her white ruffled dresses, and after every meal she had apple sauce behind her ears, and any speck of dirt in the garden clung to baby Irma Jean like bees to clover. "Irma Jean," complained Mrs. Potter, "you're as dirty as a little pig. Someday, if you're not careful, you'll turn into one." Irma Jean even sounded like a pig. She did not coo and babble like other babies. She snorted and snuffled when she slept. She gurgled and grunted while she ate. One sunny day, Mrs. Potter tucked Irma Jean into her pram, gave her a rice cake and wheeled her out into the garden to get some sun. "Now sit here and stay clean," Mrs. Potter told Irma Jean, and off she went to dust the fence. But Irma Jean soon got bored. Clutching her rice cake, she crawled out of the pram and across the lawn, leaving a trail of crumbs behind her. Straight through the loose board on the pig pen fence crawled baby Irma Jean, smack into the middle of the biggest, muddiest puddle she could find. Irma Jean squealed with joy and dropped her rice cake in the mud. A little piglet came and gobbled it up. The piglet followed the trail of rice cake crumbs through the loose board into the pig pen fence, across the lawn and straight up to the pram. Mrs. Potter dusted the last stake on the fence and stretched her arms in the sun. "What a fine day," she said to herself. "I'll just take baby Irma Jean for a stroll before I clean the weather vane on the barn." She peered into the pram. Little snorts came from a bump under the blanket. "How sweet," thought Mrs. Potter. "Baby Irma Jean is sleeping." She wheeled the pram out through the gate and down the road. "This road could do with some sweeping," she said to herself. The pram bounced and bumped and woke the piglet up. Said the piglet under the blanket. "The lilacs look a bit dusty," Mrs. Potter remarked. Said the piglet as it hunted for some more rice cake crumbs. "These trees could do with a bit of sprucing up," said Mrs. Potter. Said the piglet. It poked its snout out from under the blanket. "Ah!" screamed Mrs. Potter. "Oh, Irma Jean, it's finally happened! You naughty little pig!" She snatched the piglet out of the pram and hugged it tight. "Don't worry, Irma Jean," she comforted the baby pig. Back up the road she raced to call the doctor to see what could be done. As she opened the gate, the piglet squirmed free and ran towards the loose board in the pig pen fence. "Come back, Irma Jean!" Mrs. Potter cried. She sprinted to the pig pen. And there, in the mud, sat baby Irma Jean. "Oh, Irma Jean, thank goodness you're yourself again!" cried Mrs. Potter. "Come out of there this instant! Irma Jean squealed and clutched a fistful of mud. "Come out right now," ordered Mrs. Potter, "or I shall have to come in and get you." Irma Jean dug her toes into the mud and snorted with glee. Mrs. Potter sighed. She took off her shoes and socks and climbed over the pig pen fence. Oozed the mud between her toes. "Oh," said Mrs. Potter in surprise. Squelched the mud around her heels. "Why," said Mrs. Potter, "this feels nice." She squoozed and slooped her way over to baby Irma Jean, picked her up and hugged her hard, mud and all. "Irma Jean," said Mrs. Potter, "you are a pig, a happy little mud pig." Irma Jean shrieked happily and plastered her mother's nose with mud. Right there in the pig pen, Mrs. Potter and Irma Jean stamped and stomped and splashed. Mrs. Potter still keeps a spotless house. The doorknobs gleam, the copper pots shine. She even cleans the rubbish before she throws it away. But on sunny afternoons, Mrs. Potter and Irma Jean slip away to the pig pen, take off their shoes and dance a messy mud jig together. The